Awesome. Welcome, everybody. For those of you I don't know, my name is Terri Maxwell. I had my purposeful awakening about almost 15 years ago and sold my business, started over with this crazy idea there has to be a way to do good and make money as an entrepreneur. And it's been quite the ride. A few years into my journey, somebody told me about conscious capitalism, and I got involved with conscious capitalism. And then somebody told me about B Lab, and I started really following them. And then I had this big question: is there any data to back up what I'm feeling inside? I know my soul says this is a better way to do business and it's a better way to go, but is there any data that backs this up? And so I started doing some research in 2014-ish, 2015, I came across Good Must Grow, and I started kind of cyber stalking Heath and following some of the work that he does, and have been following it ever since. And I use it to make decisions. I use it to know where to invest. I use it to know when to press on the gas. And his research has been incredibly accurate. And he's just a delight to work with. And I've recently partnered with him as well as the B Lab LA group and the Conscious Capitalism LA group to host a series of Conscious Business Growth Summit events. So Heath, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know I've got lots of questions. There were some very interesting things this year, but I'm going to let you do your magic and turn it over to you. And then we are going to have lots of opportunities for folks to ask questions. So Heath, take it away.
All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Friday. And so excited to be here, especially after hearing intros and all of the really awesome businesses that we have on the line here. Terry's done a great job of collecting some conscious entrepreneurs here for a good discussion. And I do hope we're going to plow through 10 years of data here, and I'm going to do that as expediently as I can while not rushing it, so that we do have lots of opportunity for feedback and questions and discussion as we get a little deeper into the conversation today. Really quickly, I am the founder of Good Must Grow. We are a socially responsible marketing consultancy. We've been around exactly as long as this index. One of the very first things we did when we opened the doors back in 2012 was to start to mine for data and try to add to the conversation out there about conscious consumerism and social responsibility and all of those topics. We work with companies and causes who we want to see grow, and we work with the good guys and gals out there. So that's what we're all about. This index came along because, rewinding 10 years, there was data in the market about conscious consumerism and all of the things that we're tracking, but a lot of that data was not benchmark and longitudinal in nature. It was sort of a snapshot in time, and so it gave you a kind of a window into how things were at the moment, but there was nothing that would help project the momentum of this movement and provide any trending data for us to kind of see, are we headed in the right direction? Are we making progress over time? What are the trends around this? So that was one thing that I wanted to try to help contribute to the industry with this research. The other thing was in the early days of benchmarking what was happening out there, all the research was very cheerleadery in nature. So it was, the majority of Americans are good, they want to support good business, people want to work for good businesses, and it was all of the good news, right? Which was important, I think, at the time to get people to see that this was something that would be sustainable. But I always, there was always this tugging inside of me to say, this can't all be good news. We can't have already succeeded here. There's got to be more to the story, and we need to understand where we need to get better. And we need to understand where the obstacles and the challenges are with this movement so that we can lean into those, because this is not going to be an easy road for us to kind of unwind the status quo and to actually be using business as a force for good. So we've always used this research in our as we talk about it in the market, we always try to tease out, where are we going wrong, or where could we be better? What can we fix? What can we advance here? Because again, this is a movement that has to be successful, in my opinion, but it's also one that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of work moving forward, even from where we are today. So I'm going to hop right in here and talk about what we've seen in year 10 of our research here. Overall, we have an index score that comes from a larger body, a larger survey that gauges a lot of different things. But the core of the survey is the index score, and that's what we use as kind of a top line result to sort of trend and see where are we headed over time. The algorithm that produces this score is based on a 100-point scale, and we're looking at three variables. The first is how important do consumers feel that supporting good brands? You know, what is the feeling of this is something that is important to do for consumers. Second variable is actual behavior. So are consumers supporting conscious brands? And then the third variable, and this is what makes our survey a little bit unique in the marketplace still today, is are people intending to increase their support of do good brands in the year ahead? And so we look at importance, behavior, and intent, and those get weighted differently because obviously behavior is the one thing that is 1000% true and accurate. You either did it or you didn't. How important you feel about something or what your intentions are for the future. There's a little bit of noise there, you know, when you ask someone those questions. So anyway, we take those three variables. We have an algorithm that produces the score, and again, on a 100-point scale. So the interesting thing of what we've seen over the last decade is that, you know, the first 5 years, there was not a lot of fluctuation. It was pretty much a consistent, you know, we were trending in the mid to high 40s, and, you know, we weren't seeing a ton of movement. And, you know, we're not expecting to see huge swings with this research because we're trying to track this in a way that shows movement and change and not have a lot of dynamic dips and peaks and valleys here. So, but something interesting happened right around 2019, and we just really fell off a cliff with the index score heading into COVID. Something was going on before COVID, but the pandemic really just doubled down on what we were seeing, and we dropped to a historic low over the course of those 2 years. Then in 2021, we, of course, shot up to an all-time high. Why not, right? So totally surprised by what we saw in 2021 after 2019 and 2020. And then in 2022, we did see a slight decline in the overall index score. This was not as surprising, and we'll get into some of the reasons why we expected to see a slight decline this year. But I think if you look at the scores over time, for me, we are still trending in the right direction overall. We are seeing a little bit of growth from the last decade, and there's still a ton of work to do, and there's still a ton of progress to be made. So that's the overall there. So again, these are the three factors that we look at, right? So importance, behavior, and intention. And the main reason that the score did not continue from its 2021 high is the middle column here. So if you look at the importance that consumers place on socially responsible brands, we're up from 60% in 2013 to 67% this year. Same with their intentions to invest more in these brands. We're from 29% in 2013 all the way up to 36% this year. Unfortunately, we've lost ground in the percentage of consumers who say they actually purchase goods or services from a socially responsible company. 62 in 2013, and we had a high of 65 the following 2 years, and now we're down to 57%. This is not surprising for anyone who's been paying attention to the world that we're living in, because the price of goods continue to go up. We're wrestling with inflation. It's more expensive. Gas, food, whatever you are consuming as a consumer, it's more expensive. Meanwhile, this year's survey, 1/4 of Americans told us that they actually had a decrease in their household income in the last year. Meanwhile, 46%, almost half of Americans, say that the cost of socially responsible goods and services prevented them from doing more, despite their best intentions. So, you know, we have rising costs, declining income in the household, and the belief, and in a lot of cases, the reality that socially conscious goods cost more than less consciously produced goods and services. And this isn't always true, but I think a lot of people automatically assume if this is a conscious brand, I'm going to have to pay a premium for that product or that service. So all of these things came into play this year to put a slight drag on the overall index score, as you saw on the previous slide. We don't just ask people about their conscious shopping with the survey. We look at a lot of different do-good behaviors along the way. And I'm going to go through a few of these just to show you how we're trending in other areas. The first one here is being green. So recycling, properly disposing of waste, using reusable products. And as you can see here, we have lost a little momentum over time on the recycling and the green behavior front, and up from a high of 90 in 2015 down to 81% of Americans this year who said yes to this question. Meanwhile, reducing consumption, same story, from highs of 79 earlier in the index down to 66% this year. So not seeing that go in the direction we would want it to go. On the other hand, more people are either looking proactively for brands to support who are socially responsible and or boycotting brands that they feel aren't doing the right thing and producing products and services the right way. So this is actually good news. And as we'll talk about a little later, consumers aren't exactly the most proactive and aggressive people to support, even when they decide that this is something that's important to them. So we're going to have to give them a nudge. So this is good that we actually are seeing more consumers say, I have a role to play here and I need to be a more active and truly conscious consumer and not just say the right thing. For all of you out there supporting nonprofits or who care about nonprofits, probably everyone on this call today, this is one of the most troubling things for me, just looking at the research and the data. We have a small crisis, I believe, in terms of charity and nonprofit. We're seeing continual slides across the board. If you're talking about volunteering, donating, contributing financially, all of these are going, and you can see the deltas here. These are pretty big drops in percentages from a survey that is tuned to just detect very small movements. So seeing 17% decline in the number of Americans who say that they volunteer time to a charity, that they contributed financially to a charity, et cetera. There's a lot of work, I think, to be done in the nonprofit space and to get people back engaged. I think a part of this is probably a little bit of the conscious capitalism movement, maybe pulling a little bit of energy and attention away from nonprofits. There are people who say, I would rather, in our survey, about 20% of Americans say, I would rather contribute to doing good by purchasing socially responsible goods and services versus donating to a charity, just because it's easier for me as a consumer to spend money on a product that I know is going to do some good in the world, and that dollar just did two things for me at once. And so some of this might be attributed to that, but I think more broadly, those in the nonprofit space, we need to evaluate how we put a little more air in that balloon moving forward. We ask this question every year about trust, and this was one of those, like, you just say, I don't know what to say about this one. I can't explain it, but it's good news, I suppose, that a shockingly increased number of Americans say, yes, I will always trust a brand when it tells me it's socially responsible. Good news in the fact that we do want our claims to be believed, those of us who are doing this the right way. Not so great news if consumers are going to blindly believe claims made by all companies who say that they are doing the right thing, because we all know that there's a long history in consumerism and advertising and marketing of companies making claims and not backing those up. And the mail is here, which is why you hear dogs barking in the background. And I don't know what to do about that. So we're just going to let them bark. There are three main insights from this year's research that I wanted to spend a few minutes on today. And the next three slides, we'll unpack those. The first is, we have a top 20 good company poll. So we're back in 2015 as part of the index. We added this question. We just asked consumers, name one company or organization that you think of first when you think of a socially responsible company. And this is always the most interesting question on the survey, as you probably are gathering just as you're looking at this list for the first time. But the key takeaway here for me is that we have an issue when it comes to conscious consumerism because we don't have a hero brand to point people to and to carry the day. Early on, Tom's served in that role. And if you go back to the very first couple of years of us asking this question, Tom's was number one on this list. It was top of mind for people who were, when we asked them to name a socially conscious brand or organization. At that time, their one-for-one model was still fairly novel. It was being talked about all over the media. They were everywhere all the time. And the example of what do good brands or conscious capitalism was all about. And they were serving in a hero or a poster capacity for this movement and something that we could all direct people to. And I feel like we're missing that now. And just as one point of view here, Tom's is not on this list in 2022. They fell all the way off the list for the first time since we've been measuring this. Amazon, meanwhile, is enjoying a 4-year ride at the top of the list. They had twice as many votes as any other company this year. Last year, they had 3 times as many votes as any company. Now, the average consumer probably engages with Amazon almost daily, whether it's, groceries or goods online or entertainment via their television. So there's a reason that some of these companies, if you just put a consumer on the spot, they probably just came from shopping at Amazon. Maybe they're going to say Amazon. And Amazon does a lot of proactive things in terms of their marketing and advertising, and they have a lot of social responsibility efforts that they take on. And we also know that there's a lot of discussion around that company and a lot of the larger companies in terms of, are they doing more good than not? And at their core, are they a mission or purpose-driven company? Whatever you feel about Amazon or Google or Walmart or some of these other large companies you see here, I don't think anyone on this phone today or this presentation today would say Amazon would be my vote for, when people said this is a socially responsible company or brand, and this is the flagship. If you're thinking about that, I don't think anyone would circle that company and say that's the one we want, right? There are companies on there like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's and like some of the more well-known B Corp brands and brands that have been around for a very long time doing this type of work. But again, we don't have that brand that is big enough and loud enough and consistently in the media enough carrying the flag for this movement. And so we have to figure out what that means and how we account for that and how we grow this movement despite not having that very clear leader and just a hero brand that would, I think, help us in the process. The second key takeaway, and that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today, was a lot of times those of us who have purpose at the core of our business, we lean on that, and sometimes we lean on that to the detriment of making sure that we're meeting consumer needs. And every piece of research that you can find and everyone that you talk to that has been looking at this movement with any depth will tell you, you have to meet the consumer needs first, and then your mission will matter. And I think across the board, we have uneven performance from purpose-driven companies in terms of being able to truly meet consumer needs alongside of mission. And so we have seen a lot of examples of companies, or in a lot of cases, nonprofits, who say, you know what, people want to support me, so I'm going to start selling t-shirts, or I'm going to sell some coffee, or I'm going to sell whatever the thing is. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter if I do a good job with it, because I'm a nonprofit. People will buy that product, and this will be another line of revenue for us to support our cause and help us balance, not having to count only on donations. The research shows that if you're not meeting the needs of the consumer, if you're not delivering, on price and quality and all of these other things first, your mission really doesn't matter to the average consumer. One of my favorite questions that we ask every year in the survey, I don't have a slide on it here, but we ask consumers, 3 scenarios, pick your favorite, what you would prefer. Would you rather shop at a store that's going to give you a buy one, get one free offer? A buy one and give one of that product away to someone in need? Or you buy the product and a portion of the proceeds go to charity? And we asked that question in the middle of a survey on social responsibility and conscious consumerism. And so we sort of led the witness all the way along. This is like almost one of the last questions. You would think people would be primed to tell you what they think you want to hear at this point. And instead, what we see is the majority of Americans every year say, I'll take the buy one, get one free. Because at the end of the day, we're all consumers. And we want our needs met first, and then we're going to, if we can do good in the world, if we can support a good organization, et cetera, that's going to be gravy, icing, frosting, whatever you want to call it. Finally, I referenced this a little earlier. We have to build agency among consumers, and especially the ones who are more active in this space already. They have to be more engaged and more equipped to carry this message forward. When we ask people how they're personally determining if the company is socially responsible, 37%, which is the leading total here, read packaging on the product. So 2 things. Number 1, your product packaging is super important. And number 2, consumers are not really going out of their way to research and determine which brands are socially responsible. So I don't think we want consumers left to their own devices in the aisles of the store reading product packaging to decide which of these brands am I going to support. And as we talked about earlier, there are a growing number of consumers who are more engaged and more active. But if you think about our country and where we are right now, and just what the research has shown over the last 10 years, about 1/3 of people fall into that I'm all in bucket. I'm a conscious consumer. I'm going to research. I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to go out there and do all the good that I can with all of my purchases. You have another roughly 1/3 on the other end of the spectrum that are just not engaged, and they're just shopping. They're not trying to do anything purposeful. They don't care. They're not paying attention. They want what they want as a consumer. That's it. And then you have that magic middle that saying the right things. They feel like it's important to support good brands. They're doing a little bit of this, but we still haven't found a way to move that middle to the left to join those super high-powered conscious consumers. And when we do that, a lot of those people that are on the far right and say, I don't really care, they're going to follow the masses. Those people typically, like if the good brands are the cool brands and the most shopped brands, et cetera, they'll come along for the ride. At least a portion of those people will. I always find it interesting when we ask this question that word of mouth is not very powerful when it comes to this. And, you always, as the marketing folks on the line will tell you, word of mouth is always the most powerful way to market. And when it comes to supporting socially responsible brands, for whatever reason, this is much lower. All of the ways that you might influence someone via word of mouth show up much lower in this survey than other matters. I don't know if more people see this as more of a private, personal decision when they're supporting good brands, or if we just don't have enough people out there talking about this and being consistent about it in their daily lives and being leaders to help advance this movement. But either way you look at it, word of mouth is not a very powerful or a very prominent way of marketing here. I'm going to stop there, Terry. I have some contact information here, and we can come back to this later as well. But you've been following this since 2015. I just flew through 10 years. I'm sure I either left things out that you might want to wanted to highlight, or you might have questions, I would love just to kind of pause for a second and hear from you before we open this up to the broader group.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will have a little bit of background music, background noise here. So sorry for that. Heath, the one thing that always surprises, well, there's two actually, and I see this in a couple of other studies that I follow, is the gross miseducation of consumers. I think they have such a narrow definition of what socially responsible means. And it shows up every year in your research, and it shows up different ways, but it shows up consistently. How do we attack that? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to partner with you on the Conscious Business Growth Summit, is to really elevate the brands and the organizations like B Lab certification and conscious capitalism that are trying to really promote the movement. Why do you think there's such a mismatch between what people think, what they do, and then how they respond to the survey?
Yeah, it's a few things, Terry. So, we ask people what's holding them back in terms of doing more, and the top two every year, one is price. So they see these brands as being more expensive, and then the second factor is knowledge, and they just say, well, I don't know where to find good brands or products or services. And back to the research slide, they just aren't being proactive enough and engaging enough. So we have, again, this middle of the country that we need to set into action. And I think you and I have talked about this before, one of the challenges, unfortunately, in our space is we have a lot of great organizations and a lot of great movements and a lot of great brands, and there's not a lot of collaboration and integration of all of these groups. So you have everyone sort of doing their own thing and doing it well, but you don't see a lot of cross-industry collaboration within the conscious consumerism space to elevate this movement overall, and to not support a brand or an organization or an association or whatever, but to level up everything. There have been a few efforts by B Lab and others to sort of have all of their members do some joint advertising and sort of raise, the profile there. But, awareness is still a huge issue across the board. Even, B Corp, when I joined, we are a B Corp. We joined back in 2012. And at the time, our first survey, we ask every year, are you familiar with terms like B Corp or benefit corporation or conscious capitalism and some of these other things? First year of the results, there were, maybe 4 or 5% of Americans had heard of certified B Corp. Those numbers have improved over time, but the vast majority of Americans aren't familiar with those terms. And, I have friends, my favorite thing is to go into their pantry and to pull out a lot of the food brands. And if I know the type of consumer that they are and the things that are important to them, I know I'm going to find 5 B Corps in their pantry. And it's always shock to them when I turn the labels around and I show them, look, this little B with the circle keeps showing up in the foods that you're buying. They had no idea they were supporting B Corps. They had no idea what a B Corp was. But there was the King Arthur flour. There was all of these brands. Yeah, right. So they were there, and these people were doing the right, but they didn't have a way of articulating that, and it wasn't a conscious decision they were making, and so therefore they weren't influencing other people in their circle either. And that's a problem, right? If even the people that are wired to do the right thing they're doing it despite not knowing that they're doing the right thing. That's a problem. So it's not an easy thing to unpack, and there's going to be a lot of things that we have to do across the industry, but more collaboration across all of the folks who want this to be successful would be a great start for me. And so that's why I'm excited about some of the things that you and I have been doing together recently, and starting in Los Angeles and then hopefully taking that across the country, is that we need more cross-industry collaboration.
Yeah. And then the other thing I thought was interesting is, and I really thought this would change after the pandemic, is that people still think conscious products are more expensive when that's just not true. So why do you think that is a lagging belief? Is it because the halo effect of Tom's and Whole Foods and things like that, that people just don't realize that that's not true anymore.
Yeah. I think some of, the better known, so like Whole Foods is a great example. That's always associated with, whole paycheck, right? Like that's how people think about that. And so if it's a brand that's going to show up in a Whole Food, like it's a premium brand. We've also seen, the $80 white T-shirt that was sustainably made. It's great, whatever the fabric or the substance was to build it, and it's going to do all of these great things over here, and it's $80, and it's a T-shirt, a white T-shirt. So we've primed consumers because of the earlier days of the movement. The brands, they were premium brands, and we can market do good brands as premium brands if we really wanted to, but I don't know that that's going to lead us to a path where the majority of consumers are engaging in conscious consumerism on a daily basis. We all buy luxury items, right? We all aspire to have whatever the brand is across our chest or on our shoe or wherever it is. People do respond to those brands. They spend a lot of money on. You can name the designer brands, but I think we do have to unwind that belief that this is just going to obviously cost more because it's a do good brand. I also think on the other side, there are companies who need to realize that they can't just charge more in order to be a sustainable do good brand. They have to find ways to keep the consumer price competitive and do good. They can't have their cake and eat it too there and just say, well, we're going to be more sustainable or more responsible or whatever. And to do that, we're just going to charge 30% more for our products than we would have if we were just doing it the cheap and easy way. We have to find ways to make sustainable business still cost appropriate and price competitive against other products.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about that. I'm so there with you. I'm going to bring up a couple of questions, and then we can call on some people as well. One of the questions a couple of people ask is, what's the demographic makeup, and are you seeing any shifts based on demographic shifts?
Yeah, so demographics is very interesting, and so we've written a handful of articles for a Fast Company looking at the results over time, and one that I would suggest you guys go back and look at is we broke down some myths around conscious consumerism, and one of the ones that we talked about was demographics, because people think that the demographics might be the way to sort of carve out and say who are conscious consumers. And what we found the few times that we have just sort of gone deep and looking at the demographics is, is it more likely that a late 50s white male who works in a blue collar job in the Northeast is going to be less socially responsible than a millennial who's on the West Coast and works in a tech industry? And so yes, the one person is likely to be less socially responsible and wired that way than the other. But more generally across the board, we didn't see a lot of demographic data driving whether or not someone would be a conscious consumer. It was more belief and values driven than it was demographic driven. So which is good, because if this was only appealing to one demographic, that would be an issue for us overall. So I think the fact that we can reach across the aisle, across the board, across geography, income levels, education levels, et cetera, like the opportunity is there, but we just have to be better at communicating that message and motivating the consumer and being where we need to be as an industry.
And that's been the one thing that has surprised me from the very beginning when I first started this movement. Of course, the first thing you do is figure out your target market, and you look at demographics. And the people that were showing up in my first business, which is Succeed on Purpose, literally they were 17 to 80. I think the oldest person was 82. every color, every shape, every size. There's really not a demographic. So then is there anything in the data that lets you see psychographically if we could better define who the conscious consumer is? Is there anything that you see psychographically that we could point to?
Unfortunately, not as much as I would like. And that's actually an area, Terry, that we're looking at for future surveys, is how we can get more psychographic data to be able to kind of dig into that a little more. So we have all the demographic data in the world. We don't have as much on the psychographic side. And that's been a deficit in the research for sure.
Well, thank you so much. I know we've got a couple of questions from the group. Who has the first question so that you can take advantage of Heath's brain power here?
No problem.
Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of continuing this thread, I mean, is it more likely that a younger person, so let's say a Gen Z, is more aware, more apt to move in this direction if they're educated properly? And then my other question was, how big is the sample size that you are sharing the statistics from, and where are you gathering those surveys from?
No, it's great questions. So this is, we survey 1,000 Americans each year. We use a third-party research partner for the sample, and the sample is weighted to be representative of the general U.S. population, age 18 and up. So margin of error on the research is plus or minus 3%. So it's a traditional margin of error for any type of consumer survey type research. In terms of the younger, I think definitely Gen Z, millennials, like they are more naturally wired to support these. But really, we see even up through the boomer age group, there's sufficient interest and support of this movement. If you go beyond that, obviously, for logical, obvious reasons, you start to see a tapering off. But even through the boomers, we see adequate support here foundationally for what we're all trying to do. And it is a little stronger in the Gen Z and the millennial age population for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
DJ.
Hi, I have two questions. One is because the terminology, I remember when I first started with Terry, and I heard the term social, capital conscious.
Right.
And for me, it has always been social enterprise, because what I've done, I was early on with the social enterprise in the nonprofit arena. That's really where I started with Michael over in Harvard University, who talked about this. And so when I created my certificate for nonprofits, that's what we did, is help them to remove, to change from the traditional nonprofit model to the social enterprise, which did incorporate that for-profit component into the nonprofit arena, where they wouldn't have to depend on asking a lot. It'll be their services would be a good chunk of their revenue, and then they'll get some things from grants and stuff like that. So that's number one. My first question is, I want to make sure I'm clear that we're talking about the same thing. I want to make sure it's apples to apples. And then my second question, meaning that social enterprise is the same thing as all these others, because I know with B Corp it is. That has always been the same thing. The second thing is what my nonprofit is doing is, when I was working on my dissertation, I noticed that there was not a lot of empirical data, actually research that has been conducted by universities on these B Corps that's published. And so that was one of the things that we're actually going to do. So I was trying to find out if that's there as well. Are you guys collaborating with any universities? If not, I would love to have this conversation with whoever is, because that's something that we are doing. We have a couple of doctors on our staff, and that's actually what our aim is to attack it on the academic side too, so that the publications can be peer reviewed, and now it's in journals, business journals, that this model is indeed effective and can be taught into schools. So those are the two things that I have there. So number one, the definition, and number two, is anyone doing empirical research on this business model?
Got it. So I'll go number two first, and then number one. Number two, to my knowledge, there's not a tremendous amount of activity there, and I would love separately to talk with you about ways that maybe we could find to engage some universities and to do some of that, because we have for a long time wanted to engage universities. There is even a group of universities that are under sort of the B Lab umbrella that are doing some cool things, and I've talked with them a few times about, hey, I would like to extend the impact of this research and find other ways for us to, leverage your students or your researchers, or even you as an academic to kind of further some of this. So I would love to talk separately with you about that. First question, I'm glad you asked. Like I saw it out of the corner of my eye come through the chat feed. Terminology is a huge issue. And as always, like with a lot of industries that are trying to figure themselves out, and even like I work a lot in healthcare, a lot of the companies that we support end up being in the healthcare space because there's a lot of heroes in that space trying to change a broken system. And terminology is the challenge no matter what you're trying to communicate or market. But we've done a pretty good job of muddying the water here in terms of the terms that are being used for this. Some of them are just a mouthful, like conscious capitalism, like the average consumer is like, what? Social enterprise is a good one. It's also not universally accepted or understood among consumers. And we actually, that's another term that we use to ask on the survey. It was like, hey, are you familiar with this term? I think around 30% of consumers say, yes, I know what a social enterprise is. That's still not enough, right? And it's still not a majority. And so we still, from a terminology perspective, I don't know that we have the right handle for consumers for shorthand to all get around the same page and say, yep, because even when a social enterprise or a do-good brand or whatever you want to use, there's a lot of different levels of what that means. And while we are, I think in this conversation, we're saying the same thing and we mean the same thing. When you get outside of this type of conversation, there are a lot of different terms and a lot of different nuances in terms of what you would consider, a social enterprise or a socially conscious brand, or however you want to define it. All that being said, we ask consumers to do their best job of explaining what we're trying to talk about as a socially responsible company or brand. And they do an okay job in their verbatims of actually articulating the core of what we're getting at here. So the fringes, there's a lot of disconnect, but the core idea here is one that consumers actually understand and they gravitate toward. The other problem that we have is that when you look at, so B Corp is a great example, they continue to ratchet up the certification process and make it harder and harder and harder to be certified, which is a good thing because you don't want this to be a rubber stamp or something that doesn't mean anything. And they do make you work for certification. It's not just to give me, you write a check and you're going to get certified. But I have heard other people speak out against that type of model to spread this more globally, because what about those brands that are trying to do more good, but aren't going to be able to hit that B Corp bar for whatever reason? Do we want them isolated and left out of this discussion, this movement, if their hearts are in the right places and they're a company? I was just working with a company on some mission, vision, values work a couple of weeks ago. They've been around for 60 years. They're in the outdoor space, and they've had an awakening that they want to be more socially responsible. They want to clean up their supply chain, but they have 60 years of legacy business. They're not going to get certified by B Corp next year or 5 years down the road, probably. But they need to be part of this conversation. They need to be part of this movement. And so that's, to my earlier point, we can't just get the B Corps in the room and say, okay, how are we going to fix this? Because that's a different breed. And I respect every single B Corp, because to sign up and to do that and to commit to that level of scrutiny on your business model means you're all in. And we absolutely need those people as leaders, but we have to find ways to also recognize and incorporate the brands that are moving in the right direction and are committed to doing that, and have them help us spread the word and to get credit for the good that they're doing as well, because it still counts. So it's not B Corp or nothing, I guess is what I'm trying to say there.
Excellent. Any other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, I've got one. I mean, I look at the simplicity of some things that we know about. So, you know, a stamp that says organic, granted, they're looking at organic and cleaning up the act for those that have snuck in and they're not totally organic, but we understand that. It's simple. Made in the USA, simple brand. We understand what it means. Is any work being done to try to define a brand that's that simple?
Yes and no. So we have probably 150 of those currently that could be that, you know, sticker or whatever. And like, so B Corp would say it's that B, it's, you know, 1% for the planet. It's there's all of these different, especially in the food spot. I think we have a couple of food people on the line. They could break this down better than I could, all of the different certifications and stamps and approvals that can be placed on food labeling that would, you know, verify that this was done the right way. There's not a universal one. I think the initial intent of B Lab probably would have been that B Corp symbol would be the one way that you would know this company's doing it the right way. So as a consumer, you can trust it, you know, good housekeeping seal of approval style. I don't know that we'll ever get to that one brand, just because there's so many different activities out there. But it would be great, like if it could be that simple, that there was one symbol that could go on that package and people could say, yep, I can trust this. Because there's a lot of those words, you know, for the average consumer: organic, natural, local, like there's all of these buzzwords that are great marketing lines that are used in packaging, and then the fine print, you know, tells the different story. Again, in food, this is way too common, but the problem we've always had with this movement is that anything that's proven to be good and the consumer is going to resonate with it, the bad companies will hop on just as quickly as the good companies and spend 400 times more to market that in that way. So if someone's looking for organic or natural or whatever the buzzword is, the bigger companies will absolutely tell that story, no matter what the truth is behind what they're doing on a daily basis. So
Thanks.
Any other questions? I see two hands up. Michelle.
Actually, Deborah was before me. Let me just be respecting that.
Oh.
Deborah, sorry.
Deborah.
I'm wondering, Heath, if there is a model in Europe or Australia or New Zealand, in some other part of the world, for like unifying the language around conscious companies or B Corp. And I know that B Corp has gone global. Is there that marketing model out there?
I don't know if there's a specific model. It is a great point, though, that the US is not the place to look to for best practices when we're talking about all of this, because all of the geographies that you just listed are ahead of us in terms of all of this. So there's a lot for us, I think, to learn internationally from other countries who have had more success and done this better. I don't know if there's a specific model there, but you know, I think it's definitely a good question to pose for us.
I'm going to jump in then. Okay, thank you. So quickly, I'm ready to be a megaphone. So Terry, I was watching, I can't remember, it was one long videotape of you, and I know you were doing face-to-face. I think LA is February. Is June still New York? Because I'm inviting people from all over the world to come. So just want to make sure I have the dates correctly for that.
Yeah, we actually moved LA to early May. Dallas will be mid-May, and then New York is either going to be June or September. We haven't nailed that down yet.
Okay, well, I have a lot of people interested in coming to New York, so please let me know. That's where I am, by the way. And, I just want to underscore, I'm helping corporations take baby steps. So they're not B Corps, so Microsoft, who just let go 10,000 people. And I can't remember how many, Amazon, was it 20,000 they just let go of? Yeah. So just, want to really connect with whoever. I know we have 3 minutes left, so I want to leave time for anyone else who has a question. But really want to, as I speak to them, to take baby steps. I appreciate the baby steps I take in my life, and I want to be encouraged to take more. So I don't want to be judged that I've only taken, 10 baby steps, because that's how I got to walk. So I just want to say that's very close to my heart, and really look for how I can, connect with other people to help do that. Thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have some ideas, Michelle, so I'll follow up with you on that, and I will definitely let you know as soon as we nail down New York.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, and for those of you that are tuning in, when we post the recording, an amazing conversation, and Heath, you are truly a leader in this space. I respect you, I admire you, I follow your work, and I encourage everybody to work with you. And thank you so much for doing what you do. And I'm really looking forward to working with you on these Conscious Business Growth Summits and trying to spread the word and really put some fire behind conscious business.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity today, Terry. It was great to meet everyone. This is conversations like this make me feel good, especially going into a weekend. It's like, yes, we're going to do this. And there are people out there who are just as excited and passionate as I am and as Terry is. So I thank each and every one of you for the mantle that you're taking up and doing your part in this movement. So keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.